and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Election Central at Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup. We have a crowded screen today because we are joined by
Merryn Johns from Queer 40. Hello, everybody.
Welcome. And then let's go to the headlines here. We're going to give you all the key election results and analysis, including some historic breakthroughs for LGBTQ candidates.
Yeah, a lot of fascinating news there. We will also try to figure out how the results in Congress bode for LGBTQ rights, although I think that's a big toss-up.
And surprise, surprise, Governor DeSantis's Florida Medical Board has banned most gender-affirming care for minors.
Terrible.
Well, a shop in Oklahoma was firebombed after it hosted a drag show.
And we do have a step backward for LGBTQ rights in the Israeli election.
And lesbian novelist and memoirist Doris Grumbach has died at 104 years of age.
The life of pioneering lesbian leader Urvashi Vad was celebrated here in New York.
U.S. officials are reporting on their first visit with Brittney Griner in a Russian prison since her arrest in February and recent conviction.
And who says the master's tools can't dismantle the master's house? We have Miss Argentina and Miss Puerto Rico meeting at a beauty pageant, falling in love and getting married.
Crazy.
And who says a lesbian can't get elected governor in the United States? We have at least one.
And maybe two.
Maybe two, but I certainly would like to start with that. It's an historic breakthrough. Maura Healey in Massachusetts, the Attorney General of the state, has been elected the governor of Massachusetts.
Now, she is a beloved leader in Massachusetts. She's been the Attorney General for the last few years and has brought some really significant historic prosecutions as Attorney General. And she won an overwhelming victory by 30, 40, 50 points. She was way ahead. And
over a MAGA candidate. I mean, they've elected Republican governors in Massachusetts, but they've been moderates.
Mitt Romney, Charlie Baker. Charlie Baker decided not to run again for governor. So Maura Healey stepped up and has been elected with overwhelming support in Massachusetts.
But we don't have a final result from Oregon yet. Tina Kotek, out lesbian Democrat, would be the second. There she is with President Biden campaigning this past week. So we await the results there. You may know by the time you see this in other parts of the country.
I think she's got a very good chance. She's quite a bit ahead by a couple of points. So I'm going to put my money on Kotek as well.
Her race was complicated by a third candidate in the race, an independent, and so that made it harder for her to run away with this. But she is leading at the moment by inches, so we're hopeful there.
And another lesbian breakthrough in Vermont, Becca Balint is the first woman and the first LGBTQ person elected to Congress from Vermont, and there she is.
Also a very appealing human being who is very popular in Vermont, was a leader in the state house and has gone on now to run for this one House seat in Vermont that was vacated by who stepped up to run for the Senate and won that seat. And so Becca has won this race. And in fact, there was a more mainstream candidate she faced in the primary and defeated, and then has gone on to win the seat in Congress.
And since we're talking about Congress, we should say that apparently we're going to have at least a record 10 members of out LGBTQ members of Congress for the first time, and another one is from Southern California. Robert Garcia, the mayor of Long Beach, he's the first LGBTQ immigrant elected to Congress.
And I saw him tweet that he owes a lot of it to his mom. It was very nice to for him to give a shout out there. It means so much, I think, to the Latinx community that he's won. So.
And you, I know, Merryn, are happy and impressed by all the lesbians who are winning.
I think so. I always felt so grateful to Anise Parker and Tammy Baldwin, but I often thought they must feel quite lonely, you know, because there weren't many like them. And this year we've seen, I think it must be a record number of lesbians, and might I say, really well-liked lesbians, which is something we can't take for granted. You know, when you actually do end up getting that much support and goodwill from your community, when they obviously, you can't hear anything bad about Maura Healey. Everybody unanimously says she's a terrific person and a terrific leader. It just makes me feel so, after so many years at the lesbian coalface, I might say, it feels so wonderful.
Well, you're reminding me that with the results coming in last night and her being touted as the first lesbian elected governor, I thought to myself, now, wait a minute. Is she really the first? And I thought, wait, what about Dixie Lee Ray in Washington State? Remember her?
Was she out?
No. And
that's it.
I combed her Wikipedia page last night and every other reference I could get to. She was asked about it a little, but never admitted to it. She was extremely idiosyncratic and lived in a trailer with 5 dogs. As the governor of Washington, was a nuclear science specialist. Was very admired for her scientific expertise, but was a very difficult human being and had big fights with environmentalists, but she was very butch. And so people assumed she was a lesbian, unmarried, no mention of any partner of any gender. And so Maura Healey is certainly the first out lesbian governor.
Well, let's go back to these congressional races. Now, we don't have the final results from the Palm Springs district, which also includes a lot of areas around that. Will Rollins there on the left is an out gay man running against the incumbent Ken Calvert, who is anti-gay. And so I've only seen about 27% of the vote in there for some reason. And Will Rollins is leading, but that vote may be all be coming from Palm Springs.
It just defies logic to be anti-gay and to be in Palm Springs. I'm sorry, call me.
Well, I don't think he had Palm Springs in the district before. Now he does. So he tried to moderate himself a little bit, this Calvert guy. A lot of the Republicans tried to do that around the country at the end of the campaign. You know, people saying, well, I'm against abortion, but I'm not going to get rid of it. I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm not going to vote for it nationally, that kind of stuff. That was one of the themes. We should say that we don't have a picture here, but Eric Sorensen in Illinois is the first out LGBTQ person elected from Congress from Illinois. Mm-hmm. But then we've got our first out gay Republican getting elected to Congress on Long Island, beating a gay guy, a gay Democrat.
We had Republican members.
No, elected. They're saying he's the first elected.
Yeah.
What about the guy from, who was the Republican who came out while he was in Congress, but then I think got reelected as an out gay man?
We will go through that next week, but let's get through this.
Don't need to turn it into a quiz.
Put the picture up again. So on the right there, and he is on the right, he's a MAGA Republican, George Santos, defeated Robert Zimmerman there on the left, who was the Democrat. This is the first time we think that two out LGBTQ people have run against each other. Now, you know, this was the Long Island suburbs where there was a lot more Republican surge, fear of crime. Here in New York, for instance, where Governor Hochul got reelected by 5 points, which it should be more than that. But out on Long Island, she did much worse. I mean, in Manhattan, 84% of us voted for the Democrat, and we live with all the crime stories that are going out to Long Island. But the Long Island people were scared, and they elected a lot of Republicans.
Well, the New York Post is working full time and overtime to keep people on the right. So in New York, so you can thank the Post probably for some of that crime narrative. And
the pockets where Zeldin got a huge number of votes are responsible for the Democrats losing 5 congressional seats in New York State, which is what is turning the Congress over to the Republicans, probably. Yes. Also, this whole thing about crime and this, the news media sensationalizing crime stories to sell papers is really a heinous approach that did cost us a lot in this election. And it is all made up and phony and bad.
Former Governor David Paterson of New York, who I'm not especially fond of these days, but he made a very important point. One of the reasons fear of crime is so ramped up is we have video of many of these crimes from surveillance cameras. And when you're sitting at home watching the news and, if it bleeds, it leads, they run these things, you say, God, that could be me getting pushed off the platform. We never saw it before. We never had pictures before, generally, of what happened. And that created a lot more fear.
Well, it turned out really badly in New York. And of course, Sean Patrick Maloney is the one member of Congress, LGBT, who lost his seat because of redistricting in the state and where he ended up running and resentment against him for that. But, he also was the head of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, and the Democrats did much better in the House than they were expected to. So do we give him credit for that, even as he lost his own seat?
I mean, we should just run through some of the incumbents who got reelected, and we're glad they did. And they weren't all sure things. Angie Craig in Minnesota, Yay! Chris Pappas in New Hampshire. That was not a sure thing. Sharice Davids in Kansas.
Oh, that was amazing. And here we have Kansas, a very red state, elected a Republican senator, but the Democratic governor, Laura Kelly, got reelected. Kansas was the whole kickoff with their abortion vote. That really showed people that we had possibilities in a year when we thought we'd be a mess. And Sharice Davids getting reelected. It's all fantastic in Kansas.
We're going to have to stop saying, what's the matter with Kansas?
Exactly.
That's and right. Also, and a First Nations person as well. We're a terribly underrepresented demographic. It's so important that she hung on, I think.
I'm saying, who did you say? I missed that.
Sharice Davids.
Oh, yes, of course.
None of these were sure things, obviously. So I was very grateful that she's back. It's terrific.
And some of the longtime incumbents were reelected. Mark Takano in California, in Wisconsin, Mark Pocan, and David Cicilline in Rhode Island. Now, let's go back to...
Well, unfortunately, we did not win a race in Ohio. Jim Obergefell was... running for the House in Ohio, the man who brought us legalization of same-sex marriage in his Supreme Court case. But he was defeated in Ohio as the Republicans won the governorship and horrible J.D. Vance won the Senate seat.
And then we had some...
to Mr. Obergefell. I'm so sorry, Jim. We were so happy to feature you in the run-up, and now I'm going to, in your honor, uncork one of your equality wines and drown my sorrows on your behalf. I'm very sorry.
All right.
The hillbilly elegy guy got in, right? Hillbilly elegy. That tells you something.
There were some statewide LGBTQ victories. We think that Chris Mays in Arizona, this isn't final, she would be the first LGBTQ statewide executive in Arizona history as the Attorney General. She's a former Republican. And then in Connecticut, Eric Russell has won. He's the first Black LGBTQ statewide elected official in U.S. history, the state treasurer. He was leading 51 to 46. I think he'll pull through.
Yeah. We're waiting for results from Oregon of a congressional LGBTQ candidate, Jamie McLeod Skinner. As we wait on Tina Kotek's race, we're also waiting on Jamie's race.
Right. A couple of other races around the country, couple of firsts. In Michigan, the first out non-binary bisexual in the state legislature, Emily Devendorf, who had worked in Equality, Michigan. And then we go to James Rossner in New Hampshire, the first trans man ever elected to a state legislature in U.S. history. This is in New Hampshire. There are currently only 6 trans men serving in elected office nationwide.
Can I just jump in there and add that we had a record number of, I think it's a record number of trans and non-binary people running for office this year, 72, which is up from 52 in 2020. And out of the 5 contenders, I think 4 have made it, and the only one who didn't was Stephen Kingsley, who would have been the first trans man elected in Arizona history.
There really were an overwhelmingly large number of LGBTQ people elected across the board. In Montana, a trans woman, Zoe Zephyr, has been elected to the state house there. And in Minnesota, there are now 11 LGBTQ state senators and representatives, including Lee Fink, who you see there, and including trans and two-spirit politicians. In Minnesota, we occupy seats in the first in the Congress with Angie Craig, and the county attorney, school board members, city council members, lots and lots of LGBTQ people getting elected across the country, everywhere.
For those of you watching out there, we are still highly underrepresented in legislatures and everything, but we got our first 2 in Alaska, 2 outstate lawmakers, Jenny Armstrong and Andrew Gray, and in California they have the first out black legislator, Corey Jackson. Let's talk about some of the statewide races. Of course, in Michigan,
I got one more state rep in Massachusetts, non-binary Sam Montano. There are several non-binary people elected. You mentioned Emily Devendorf in Michigan. Well, now Sam in Massachusetts also.
Democrats did terrifically in Michigan. They passed the abortion rights. They reelected their Democratic governor, Gretchen Whitmer, and the out lesbian Dana Nessel, who is the attorney general out there.
Thank God for Dana Nessel.
Yes.
There were 5 states voting on abortion proposals, and every single one of them, from California to Kentucky, voted for reproductive rights for women.
Well, in Kentucky, I mean, they just passed. They defeated an amendment that said it would be okay for to ban abortion, but so they defeated that. But they still have a law against it. Whereas in California and in and Michigan and Vermont, it's protecting reproductive rights in the Constitution or in law. All right, and so glad to see Josh Shapiro prevail over the horribly anti-gay Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania, and of course, John Fetterman to win that Senate.
That was lovely news. And poor old Dr. Oz.
No, not poor old Dr. Oz. There was a very funny tweet in a New York City blog yesterday. Someone was tweeting, a woman walked up to me in a polling place, this is in New York, saying, where is Dr. Oz on the ballot here?
All right. And, Jared Polis got reelected as governor of Colorado. He's out gay.
So we're going to have at least 2 out governors and maybe 3 if Tina Kotek pulls it out. That's 6% of the United States governors will be out LGBT.
But a lesbian was defeated for lieutenant governor of New York. Thank goodness, Allison Esposito, who was running with the horribly anti-gay Lee Zeldin.
And I'm just here setting up a little shrine to Adam Frisch in Colorado that he completes the defeat of Lauren Boebert.
Oh my God, that would be sweet.
That would be so nice.
And Fetterman, by the way, in Pennsylvania, winning that Senate seat, He is so fantastically pro-LGBT. He has been so aggressive about hanging pride flags and supporting everything LGBT. And he is going to be such a strong voice in the U.S. Senate for all of us.
All right. So we talk about now, by the way, we talked a lot about trans candidates, and of course, the other side used trans issues against us, against Democrats across the country. And we should say that the exit polling that we have from NBC says that LGBTQ voters voted 84% Democrat and 15% Republican. Congratulations, LGBTQ community, for recognizing your self-interest.
That's right.
But DeSantis in particular had a particularly vicious anti-trans cartoon that was an election device for him.
Yes, it says, "Thank you, Joe Biden and Charlie Crist, for making Floridians pay off my student debt." And it shows a student who has a mustache and eye makeup and things like that. It's he had another one that said, "Charlie Crist forcing hardworking Floridians to pay back student loans for degrees like gender studies and French poetry." I mean, this is almost satiric. Yet he won 60% of the vote down there.
Well, I'm actually a little heartened by the fact that, because I know this stuff was running all over the country in races at every level, and yet we across the board did better than we expected to. So I have to believe that a lot of that rhetoric did not work, and that people are waking up to the fact that that is just a phony scare tactic. But I'm very angry at the news media for their refusal to see through the exploitation and the lies and be more assertive about revealing what's really going on here. And I really think they should share a lot of the blame for a lot of the bad election results and the polls. It took the news media till the last week or so of the campaign to wake up to the fact that the Republicans were pushing their polling to, again, scare people about the election. The polling you were hearing about all through the campaigns was largely Republican polling, but not identified as such. So all this stuff about the House, we're going to lose 50 seats. The Senate is in danger. All of that was Republican polling designed to drive people away from the polls.
And then people like the big polling sites like 538 and thing, they would put these polls in their averages. They would label them Republican polls, but they would put them in their averages.
And then you have the money. Stephen Miller, the horrible troll who worked for Trump and was so anti-immigrant, poured millions of dollars into anti-trans advertising and pro-QAnon advertising throughout the country. And you have, Lauder in New York giving Lee Zeldin $11 million to
Ronald Lauder, this is the Estee Lauder fortune. A cosmetics fortune. He injects himself into politics this way. And, an $11 million investment, he's going to get a lot of it off his taxes if he wins, so that's why he does it.
Well, I'm always happy when someone like that puts $11 million into a race and loses. But his famous statement towards the end of the campaign in this whole crime context was, "I would never ride the subway." Well, of course you wouldn't. You could give $11 million to a losing candidate.
Right.
I'm not going back to his museum.
No, not at all. To ask both of you to editorialize a little bit more, as a media person, I mean, it's a very fair call. A lot of the media, the tabloids and the front pages lately have been talking about these issues with a mixture of panic and scorn when it comes to our community. And, the Republicans promised a red tsunami, which has not happened. And we were clinging to the idea and the hope of a rainbow wave. So where do you, in these two metaphors, what has happened, in your opinion, for the midterms?
Well, obviously it wasn't a red tsunami. It was a toxic sludge, but it wasn't a red tsunami. And there was an increase in LGBTQ people. Look, I give Kathy Hochul credit. I went to the rally for her in Greenwich Village at the Stonewall Friday before the election. And the MC of the event was, well, she was introduced by Andy Cohen, but the MC was a drag queen. And she wasn't afraid in front of the media to be seen, this way. And, just give it back.
Nobody threw a Molotov cocktail through the window? I'm so surprised.
There was some little dust up there, I think, but I think they calmed that quickly. We have just gone through this whole litany of people who won and people you would not expect to win, people across the board in terms of race, gender identity, sexual orientation. Geography was not a barrier. Now, do I wish we'd won a few more seats so that we could retain the House, which is still not out of the question as we're recording, but a long shot. And have more people in the Senate? Yes, I do. But I think it's all positive for us and heading in the right direction. But we got to get past this, these baiting memes of trans people. And we've got to keep fighting at the school board level and all of that. It's all incredibly important. I also want to mention that something I was just beginning to hear about today in the aftermath is the impact of the January 6th committee hearings and how important they look in retrospect for being a solid, transparent, truth-telling operation that went on for some time and really put the idea in people's heads of what was really going on. And I think that did have an impact on voters in turning out vote, in turning out sensible vote. I think that had a much bigger impact than we gave them credit for.
But I don't think the Republicans have learned their lesson. I think if they win the House, you're going to have Jim Jordan heading the Judiciary Committee instead of Jerry Nadler, our congressman. And they're going to be holding these ridiculous hearings, these lynch mobs, and acting out. If they were smart, they wouldn't do that.
But that's the thing. That's why I think we did as well as we did, is because they have overplayed their hand. They are not subtle. They are not nuanced. And they just go in with a hammer. And the result is that people begin to see through them. And who do we have to thank for the good results we've gotten? Young people who traditionally do not vote much, but who came out and registered by the hundreds of thousands and showed up to vote, and women who, especially after the Kansas abortion win and the Supreme Court debacle, came out and registered. And I always saw this as having the potential of 2018 and 2020. As soon as Trump got elected, there are a significant number of people, largely women, also young people, and of course, visionary men who just got determined to not let that happen again. And for the last 3 elections, they have turned out and done a magnificent job. And
that accounts for the increase. The backbone of the party, of course, remains Black people.
I also think that for 2024, if Trump does indeed announce, I think his core constituency is shrinking. He still has a major part, but I don't think he has enough to get elected in 2024. And I don't think DeSantis is a national candidate. I don't think he will play well nationally.
From your lips. Well, let's talk. Go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to ask you very quickly about things to watch out for, some takeaways and some lessons from the midterms, and if we can roll them into the idea of 2024. Somebody said, I think it was Bernie Sanders, that we were putting too much focus on reproductive rights as the main issue and not enough focus on the inflation and the economy. And given that it looks like we are going into a global recession with rampant inflation, do you think people are going to end up voting with their hip pockets?
But apparently they didn't. They don't like. I mean, Biden remained having a relatively low approval rating, and yet they still voted for a lot of Democrats anyway.
I think we have to do a better job of explaining issues like inflation to people and what causes it and how to address it. Katie Porter in California, who is still in the midst of her race, it's very tight. She came out in the last few weeks with charts explaining that a lot of inflation is based on corporate leaders taking enormous profits. It's not like this is a necessary phenomenon. It's people like that taking advantage of the pandemic and people's fears and just raising prices and profiting.
I mean, basically, though, people have by now you understand the midterms, except this was atypical. Almost virtually always, the part with the president is in power loses seats at his, in this case, first midterm. Obama lost like 60-something seats. That was the shellacking. That did not happen this time, and abortion was the reason. The main reason, I would say, that started to swing things back.
And people's horror at the extremism of the right wing and their determination not to let that take over. I must say, what I'm going to, if we don't succeed in retaining the House, what I'm really going to miss is Nancy Pelosi. Sure. And what I'm most going to miss is this moment that we have a picture of and need to be reminded of. This cracks me up so much. Tearing up the State of the Union speech as Donald Trump was finishing it. It was one of the most magnificent moments in U.S. political history. I can't believe she did it. I'm so thrilled, and I will really, really miss her being in a position to do that.
Well, and by the way, this past week, none other than Newt Gingrich, a former Republican speaker and a horror show, said Nancy Pelosi is the strongest person to ever hold the speakership in U.S. history. No, he meant that she could command her troops. Oftentimes the speaker is a follower, like a John Boehner or something. But Nancy was a leader, and you did what Nancy wanted you to do. And she made it happen, and she brought people together, even people who didn't like her.
And no one else had the guts to stand there behind the president of the United States and tear up his speech.
And we know what he called her this week because he's a horror show. Anyway, let's move on to some other news.
Yes.
Hold on. Let me just. I'm horrified at J.D. Vance's win. I'm horrified that poor Sherry Beasley went down to defeat in North Carolina.
Yes.
Horrified that Mandela Barnes lost in Wisconsin. That is
very close.
And Alaska, they haven't decided the Senate seat there. It's going to be won by a Republican, but the question is, will it be won by a MAGA, real right-wing Republican, or by Lisa Murkowski, who is still in the race there. So we'll keep an eye on that. But yes, I'm ready to move on from the elections.
But Sarah Palin lost for Congress there.
Yes. That's great news. Yay, Alaska.
Okay. Well, all right. In Florida, we've been telling you about the story, but it's final now. The Board of Medicine there, under DeSantis, finalized rules to restrict gender-affirming care for minors. He really wanted that done before Election Day. There's an exception for young people already receiving treatments prior to the adoption of these rules, and there is an appeals process. But DeSantis has the board stacked with his cronies, most of whom donated to his reelection campaign. There will be a legal challenge to this, as there has been in other states where we have actually been successful in challenging these things.
And the Republican legislature in Florida had turned down this idea of blocking treatment for young trans people. So he just went around them and went to the Board of Medicine and had them issue an order.
So let's show because there's been such heinous focus against trans people, Jamie Lee Curtis. Let's hear what Jamie Lee Curtis had to say about this week.
I have a trans daughter. There are threats against her life. Just her existence as a human being There are people that want to annihilate her and people like her. The level of hatred, as if we haven't learned from fascism, like we haven't learned what the result of that is. The extermination of human beings. That is terrifying. So, Jamie Lee Curtis is scared, and you should be too. And Jamie Lee Curtis has a voice, and she's trying to use it, and you should too. And that's how we change things, is we think about them, we learn about them, and then we use our voices to bring attention to them and to fight against them.
By the way, Alabama and Arkansas do have similar bans on treatment, both of which have been stayed by the courts. The Arkansas law, the trial is on right now on barring treatment for trans youth. They figure 1,800 young people in Arkansas are at risk of suicide if they are not able to access treatment for their gender dysphoria. And Florida did not just stick to treatment for trans youth. The Board of Education also expanded their law, their Don't Say Gay law. Teachers now can lose their jobs and their licenses for teaching if they mention sexual orientation or gender in classrooms. And the expansion of the law also requires that parents be notified if the bathrooms or locker rooms at schools are accessible to trans students in their lived gender identity.
So much for the freedom state, which DeSantis touts. Another prominent person standing up for trans people is former National Basketball Association star Dwayne Wade. He spoke out about his ex-wife, Siobhan Funches Wade, objections to their trans daughter legally changing her name and gender. Zaya is 15. The wife accused Dwayne of trying to profit from Zaya's changes with marketing opportunities. Dwayne says Siobhan is an absent parent, and Dwayne is very supportive of Zaya.
Yes.
All right. Then there was what happened in Oklahoma this week in Tulsa. A place called the Donut Hole, a donut shop. They hosted a drag queen event, and the response, as usual these days, was violence. Let's go to the video.
First, here at noon, an investigation is underway after a possible hate crime targeting a Tulsa donut shop for the second time in a month. Thanks for joining us. I'm Autumn Bracey.
And I'm Reagan Ledbetter. Surveillance video posted online shows someone taping up a paper at the donut hole on Brookside before smashing the front door, then throwing a Molotov cocktail inside. Investigators say that paper referenced Bible verses and had anti-gay statements on it. The store had its front window smashed just a couple weeks ago after hosting a drag show. Anyone with information should call the TFD arson hotline. That number is 596-2777.
Awful. By the way, you're not going to know about Lisa Murkowski until November 23rd when all the ballots get in. It's a ranked choice system.
I can wait.
Yeah.
In Conway, Arkansas, 2 Kroger employees who sued over having to wear heart buttons that were blue and yellow with red lines. They said, "Oh, this is a rainbow, and I'm religious. I'm Christian. I can't do this." They won, and they are getting a settlement of $180,000 because they were fired over this when they complained about it. It wasn't a rainbow, but what if it was? Whatever. And what do we think about Chick-fil-A adding sexual orientation and gender identity to its non-discrimination policy? They updated it, of course, in light of the Bostock decision, which means you can't discriminate on that basis.
Right.
And finishing up with Gerald Bostock, he's back in the news. He's the one who sued Clayton County in Georgia for anti-gay discrimination in 2016 over a 2013 firing. He got fired because they found out he was on a gay softball team, and he has just settled for $825,000. Of course, it won us the Supreme Court decision that says you can no longer discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation in employment.
Yes.
which the right wing is challenging and trying to get religious exemptions to that ruling.
Okay. All right.
In Oregon, the Ninth Circuit, by a vote of 2-1, the two being a Trump-appointed judge and a George W. Bush-appointed judge, has ruled that free speech guarantees trump gender non-discrimination laws like Bostock. They ruled that a trans woman can be barred from the Miss United States of America pageant because the pageant leaders are allowed to assert their vision of womanhood.
Oh, yeah.
Well, if you want a different vision of what LGBTQ history is like, go to the NYC LGBT sites. That's a historic sites project. They were awarded the prestigious Trustees Award for Organizational Excellence from the National Trust for Historic Preservation for their trailblazing approach to making a once invisible history visible. So kudos there to left to right, Jay Shockley, Andrew Dolkart, Amanda Davis, and Ken Lustbader for their really indispensable work, highlighting no less than 400 sites of LGBTQ significance in New York, which you can check out on their website. And I'm going to link in our email to their video, to the video of this, which shows you a lot of them. Go to gayusatv.org, sign up for our email list, and you can be on our list.
And making more history coming up. In a couple of weeks, the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade has announced the bands, the marching bands that are going to appear in the parade. And one of them is the Queer Big Apple Corps Band, which appeared in the sort of special pandemic version of the parade a couple of years ago, but only as a standing in place pre-taped band. It wasn't a real inclusion, but evidently they did a good job because now they're going to be a regular marching band in the Thanksgiving Day parade.
And DC, the District of Columbia, was chosen for World Pride in 2015. It's an indication that the U.S. is in trouble on LGBTQ rights. That's why they come to places. The next World Pride is 2023 in Sydney, Australia. Yay! Yeah, which is going to be done in conjunction with Mardi Gras, right?
My hometown. Yes, it's going to be huge. But I did think about DC winning it for 2025. If we have a Republican president, we are going to give them hell. That's what we're going to do.
I hope so. Andy, you're right that these World Pride celebrations first started in 2000 as a millennial event that they did in Rome at the Vatican. And it was a very, very bold political...
The Holy Father was very unhappy. It was Jesus's 2000th birthday.
Exactly. And then a couple of years later, they went to Jerusalem and held World Pride, also very bold. But I wonder whether, well, we'll see what's going on in D.C. in a couple of years. But I hope it's not losing its edge. I want World Pride to be very edgy.
So I had an old friend here running the marathon in New York. He came from California. And the marathon in New York became the first ever sporting event designated as a safe space by Stonewall. Which goes around doing this because they consider themselves the original safe space. Well, and then Jacob Caswell was one of the non-binary runners. This was the first time they gave non-binary runners prize money. The last year was the first year of inclusion. And let's hear what Jacob had to say after running these 26.5 miles.
What does it mean for the LGBTQ plus community that the New York City Marathon is including the non-binary category and rewarding you with significant prize money?
I mean, it's just everything. I mean, we're just here to create space and, this is just for all the trans and the non-binary children, especially those in Florida who were just told that they can't have, gender-affirming care. Healthcare is a human right, yet their peers are going to be able to still access guns. So this is just for all of them. We're here, we're queer, we're not going anywhere, and this is for you, all of you, and it's just for all of you.
Thank you so much, Jay. Congratulations. Josh?
Nice.
we educate our community, no matter where they are, so that they can say political things when they win their category in the marathon, which, by the way, Andy, is 26.2 miles. Not.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
I don't want to scare people by thinking they have to win 26.5.
26.2. Educate us about someone we lost this week, Doris Grumbeck.
Merryn, are you?
Yeah. She's another one of these older lesbian literary figures who led a life that was incredibly rich and incredibly multifaceted. I think she wrote 7 memoirs. She never ran out of information about a woman's lived life, but she wrote novels. She was one of the first novelists to write positive portrayals of queer women, lesbians trying to leave heterosexual normative lives. She herself, I believe, had 4 children and was married for a number of decades and came out later in life and then spent another 4 decades with her partner up in Maine on a small coastal town in Maine. And I believe she went back to writing while her partner ran an exclusive bookstore, very literary bookstore. But yeah, fascinating woman who I think her partner's name was
Sybil Pike.
Yeah, yes.
And of course, Doris died at the age of 104.
Yes.
She died at Kennett Square, a retirement home in the Philadelphia area, which was also the home of Kay LaHusen, the partner of Barbara Giddings.
Wow.
So one can only imagine what was going on at Kennett Square in the last few years with both Kay LaHusen and Doris Grumbeck there.
Wow.
I would love to have been a fly on the wall listening to them talk.
All right, we better move to international news, yes?
Yes.
Well, let's start with the beauty pageant story.
Yes.
Well, this is stunning. Here, you see those 2 stunning women? Yeah. One is Miss Puerto Rico. And the other is Miss Argentina. They met at the 2020 Miss Grand International pageant, where they were both in the top 10, and they fell in love. And now they have revealed that they got married in Puerto Rico.
Yes, and came out on Instagram, which is becoming a lot more common now to say these things on Instagram. And we've seen Rebel Wilson come out. Shall I jump to Rebel Wilson?
Now, we'll save her for a minute for entertainment news. It's quite lovely to imagine 2 beauty pageant contestants getting married.
You saw Israel had their elections, and they've elected the most right-wing government ever. It's going to be headed by Benjamin Netanyahu, but he had to make deals with horribly racist, anti-LGBTQ people. There's a lot of worry that what's going to happen there as a result.
Yeah, the coalitions are always bad. We had the coalition in Australia, and of course it took our right-leaning party much further to the right. So I do fear for Israel.
All right.
Yeah.
Brittney Griner has been sent to a forced labor camp by the Russians. U.S. officials, however, did meet with her for the first time in prison and said since her arrest in February and loss of her appeal last month, they say she's doing as well as be expected under very grim conditions, being sent to more grim conditions. She gets to walk for an hour. She's reading Dostoevsky. It's terrible.
So we do know where she is because it was being widely reported that her lawyers did not know her actual whereabouts. Is that not true?
Well, it's been reported in the last day or so that she's headed to a labor camp. The U.S. Embassy officials who finally saw her praised her tenacity and perseverance. But, you'd think they could make a deal. As they move towards a deal between Russia and Ukraine on the war, which seems like it might be winding down, that might provide an opportunity to get Brittney out of Russia.
Right.
Okay. A couple of other international stories. In Japan, a U.S. man, Andrew Hai, who married a Japanese man in the United States, was denied a visa to stay in Japan in September. He's been denied multiple times. The last appeal went to the Tokyo High Court, but the immigration authority won't grant him anything but short stays.
But Tokyo couples can get domestic partnerships now, which will cover housing, healthcare, and social services. 200 smaller cities and towns in Japan already offer these domestic partnerships, but now all of Tokyo has agreed to offer them.
And Slovakia, a same-sex couple who wedded abroad have the same right to permanent residence as married couples, a regional court ruled. The process only took 2 years after denial by the immigration authorities, who, by the way, there are called the foreigners police.
In Malaysia, Islamic officials raided an LGBT Halloween party, and arrested 20 people for cross-dressing. It's a Halloween party.
Oh, they want to ban drag shows in Idaho. In Australia, we've told you about these murders in Sydney, where you're from, Merryn, and we're being thrown off a cliff from a gay cruising area. There was a conviction finally last year. A lot of this happened in the 80s and later. But a new special commission of inquiry into LGBTQI hate crimes in New South Wales is looking into 80 unsolved deaths from 1976 to 2000 that took place.
It's terrifying. I do feel there is probably I don't think it's just one serial killer. I think it's probably more some kind of syndicate of homophobes that did it for sport. I think it was probably a sport. We used to call it back in the 80s, poofter bashing. And it was a very dark and ugly side of Australian culture a number of decades ago.
Well, I don't know if it goes as far as murders everywhere, but I think that kind of attitude and action is universal. So, this is the third commission, by the way, that has looked into this. It's been regarded as minimized by the previous one, so we'll see whether this one gets any farther.
And Turkey, their leader Erdogan, his party is introducing a constitutional amendment to protect families from what he calls perverse trends such as marriage equality. The amendment will also protect women who wear headscarves. So he's, covering the fundamentalist,
so to speak.
Front.
In Poland, a court will not recognize a same-sex marriage performed in Portugal, but the court says that the law against same-sex marriage in Poland does not prohibit future legislation that could legalize it sometime in the 31st century, probably.
Qatar's World Cup ambassador, Khalid Salam, a former player, said, homosexuality is damage in the mind. Some players from Europe now plan to wear rainbow armbands in protest, and the games begin on November 20th. It appears that the Salman guy is the one damaged in the mind. He said of gay fans, they have to respect our rules here.
Mm-hmm.
Please. In Canada, they're starting a Canadian version of RuPaul's Drag Race. It's premiering soon, and to celebrate that, Justin Trudeau showed up in the workroom at the drag race competition.
Oh, he's lovely. I have a very happy memory of him marching in Montreal Pride in his first term.
All right. Can we do a little AIDS health news?
Yes. The Philadelphia Department of Health is offering grants for HIV testing, education, and linkage to care in pharmacies. They want more availability of everything, so they're trying to promote that.
In terms of monkeypox, or what we now call MPV, the Department of Health and Human Services has renewed the national public health emergency to keep the data flowing on that. But British researchers found evidence of considerable transmission of the virus in the few days before symptoms emerge, upending the received wisdom about how it is transmitted. Our CDC said it spreads after symptoms appeared, but they're now monitoring that. This research needs to be reproduced. 53% transmitted pre-symptomatically, according to this study.
The governor of Pennsylvania, the current one, who is a Democrat, Wolf, signed a law expanding criminalization of communicable diseases, including HIV.
What?
And ACT UP this week, today, in fact, as we tape, is holding a demonstration against the Manhattan District Attorney, Alvin Bragg's insistence on forcing an HIV-positive man convicted in Louisiana under terrible laws, putting him on the New York sex offenders registry. Terrible.
I have to interject quickly and say, ding, ding, ding. We've hit 300 wins, according to Victory Fund, and Tina Kotek has won.
Yay!
Oh,
Yay!
really?
Thank you for that bulletin.
You're
That's
welcome.
Weird.
We've hit 300 and she's a winner.
3
Yes.
out governors. Jared Polis in Colorado, Maura Healey in Massachusetts, and now Tina Kotek in Oregon. Fantastic.
We're taking over.
Yes.
Well, you know, there are a lot of women taking over, a lot of
Yes.
women elected governors.
Thank goodness.
Yes. All right, let's get to entertainment news because we only have 3 minutes left.
All right. I saw My Policeman, the movie with Harry Styles. I think there he is on the right. I think it was very miscast, but it ultimately did kind of move me towards the end. That's David Dawson with him.
Yes.
It's a story set in the 50s and today about.
We don't have time for that. What did you think of Almost Famous?
This is the musical of a movie that I liked, but it didn't need to be made. I'll just say that.
Okay.
Broadway Cares is making its annual Christmas ornament, Billy Porter, this year. Lovely. Congratulations, Billy. Rebel Wilson, who came out recently, Merryn will tell you.
Aussie. She was outed by a Sydney Morning Herald journalist, so behind the scenes. So Rebel came out on Instagram. She was pushed out of the closet, but good on you, love. Good on you, mate.
People have been wondering whether she's engaged to her girlfriend. She says, no, I am not engaged, but she has a new child by a surrogate. She went through a major weight loss and people thought that was too drastic, but she now says her doctor said she had to do that to be able to produce eggs for the surrogacy.
Saturday Night Live recently got their first non-binary cast member, Molly Kearney, and they're bringing in an anti-LGBTQ host this week, Dave Chappelle. Boo.
If you've been following Dairy Girls on Netflix, the last 3rd season is on now. It's so wonderful. Catch up, watch the whole thing. L Word Generation Q comes back on Showtime on November 18th, and Margaret Cho will be guest starring.
And if you need a mental health break,
Brown starts this week.
Oh, yes. And if you need a mental health break, I went to the Monet's Garden immersive experience, and it was quite wonderful down there at 30 Wall Street.
And I watched on Hulu, God Forbid, the Falwell Jr. story. It's pretty cheesy.
I liked it, and I think it's quite trenchant because it does point out how much Trump was involved with all that. Mm-hmm. It helped elect Trump.
New York Times critic called it incredibly depressing and wondered why we had to watch it.
I liked it. I like you too. I like both of you. I'm feeling a little better today.
Good, especially with Tina Kotek. We don't have time to show you the video from Urvashi's memorial, but we'll link to it.
We will link to the entire memorial in our email. That was a wonderful service. And also, when you go to our website, that's also a way to support us. You can support us on the homepage, and we hope that you do. We're trying to work hard for you.
Merryn, thank you for joining us for this election roundup. Thank you for the late bulletin.
Thank you.
And
thanks for having me.
Oh, please, you'll be back early and often. And we are done for this week. We'll catch up with more details next week, but that's the news at the moment.